We are pleased to welcome to the studio Charles Catto. He is the honorary chief of the Wasauksing Ojibwa First Nation. He represents the Frontiers Foundation, which is the oldest registered Indigenous charitable organization serving First Nations in Canada. And it's nice to meet you and have you in that chair.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Steve.
I want to start by just putting up some of the background of your organization, and then we'll chat, okay? Because Good. I suspect a lot of people haven't heard of the Frontiers Foundation, which has 4,000 volunteers. It's in more than 70 countries. You've worked on 1,200 projects. You've constructed or renovated almost 2,500 homes, 32 community centers, 4 schools, and 3 parks. And I guess I want to know from you, for starters, Chief Catto, how did it all get started?
Steve, really, it began in Africa when we were living in Zambia, and we were in the middle of a situation where there were huge bridges to be built between black and white and colored and Indian. There were kind of 4 sections of the community there. And my wife actually took a strong leadership role in developing for the first time the Young Women's Christian Association there. And it succeeded so well that we thought, gee, we better get the YM going too, which we did. And we felt that rather than meetings which just involved talking and paper, the best thing we could do was have significant, enduring good news, community centers, hospitality centers, things like that, which people of all colors and religious backgrounds could pitch in and help with. And the very first project like that, way back in '59, was really quite a success. And one thing about it was that it was quite an education for the white community there, which up to that point was just as segregated as South Africa was until very recently.
So you brought the idea, I guess, of
yes.
linking communities back to Canada?
Exactly.
And it was what, the mid-1960s you got started?
62, we came back to Canada. We were unable to return to Africa because my wife didn't react well to the treatment for malaria. So we thought, what's the best thing we can do in Canada? And we tried and eventually succeeded in selling the Canadian Council of Churches on an international work project. And our very first one was an Anglican church up at Split Lake, a Cree community in northern Manitoba. And it was quite a surprise, I think, most of all to the Indian Affairs people, who had assured me that the Native people wouldn't do anything but sit there and watch. But on that first project, there were 100 Split Lakers all pitching in, doing most of the work on their own new church. And quickly after the first project, there was just a surge of appeals from the Native community across Canada saying, Charles, churches and community centers are fine, but damn it, we need housing.
We need housing too.
And since '68, that's been our priority, both on and off reserve.
So if I can use an example that might be better known to people, in a way you're kind of the habitat for humanity of the Aboriginal world in Canada. Is that fair to say?
It is very fair to say, and they're a great program too. But we were very active in Canada for 15 years before Habitat came on the scene. And when they did come, they said, Charles, you've been working with the Native people. We'll leave that relationship with you. We'll work with the white folk. And it's been pretty well that way until recently, although now Habitat is trying to assist too with Native housing.
Well, let me follow up on that, because you clearly wear the garb of an Aboriginal person, but you are not Aboriginal. This just in, Charles, you're not Aboriginal, right?
No, I personally am Scottish-Irish ancestry, really.
So how'd you get to be an honorary chief?
Well, one of our early projects was up there in Perry Island. In the Native language, they describe themselves as the Wasauksing Ojibwa First Nation. And we had a project there way back in 1966. Actually, it was just off the island. It was in Parry Sound. It was a friendship center. But then the following years, we worked with them on the island on a community center project. But a rapidly growing friendship developed, and more of the Parry Islanders people like Conrad King and Danny Judge and Laura Pegamagabo wanted to volunteer with us and work wherever we needed them. And so we had a record number of volunteers, Perry Islanders, Ojibwa young people joining us and serving. And
where's Perry Island?
Perry Island?
Yeah.
Well, it's on the shore of Georgian Bay.
Okay. And my next question, the next where question is, where's your Order of Canada? Because I know you've got the Order of Canada.
Gee, I forgot to bring it today.
You're not wearing it today? Governor General's going to be very upset with you. You know, you're supposed to wear those. Okay, let's show some pictures here, shall we? Because,
sure.
And if we can, control room, let's show this one first. This is 2011 in the Lanark Highlands of Ontario, and this place, well, do you want to describe it for us?
Yes, well, what you're looking at there is the former home of Pat and Laura Kemp. And for 16 years they lived in this wreck of a place, and there was no septic. They just had a ditch and a hole in the ground, and they have 5 kids. Pat is a great guy, but handicapped with a bad back. His Algonquin wife, Laura, a lovely lady, a good mother. And I got to know them when we were working at Laura's mother and brother's home, of which you see a model in Almont. That was about 5 years previously.
We'll come to that in a second.
Yes.
We saw the before picture there, but then your organization had at that home. Should we put up the after shot?
Yes, by all means.
Okay, that's how long did it take you to transform the previous picture to that?
That was about 5 months from dismantling the old shack and getting all that debris away.
And this is what you do?
This is what we do, and that's a textbook Operation Beaver project, and that new home is a real testament to what can be done in our style of activity. There was only actually one paid participant there, Steve Bullock, the supervising carpenter. Then there were 8 local volunteers, family and neighbors.
How about the supplies? And
the supplies. So many of them were donated and discounted by Rideau Lumber. At Rideau Lumber, they've been really marvelous. They're part of the home hardware chain. And
so
they
where do you get, Chief? Where do you get all your volunteers from?
Well, they're recruited internationally. We've had some very fine volunteers from Germany and Japan, as well as from Britain and France and Belgium and so on. And that's been a big satisfaction for me, Steve, because I'm quite a bit older than you, but I remember when guys just a little older than I were sent out to kill Germans and Japanese, and now I see these young people of all backgrounds building good news together, and I have to admit some of our best volunteers were Germans, you know. Charles, we can do it. It takes long here, man. And, you know, and they were great.
You want to tell us how old you are?
Well, I'm 83 years old.
83. Mm-hmm. So you certainly do have first-hand memories of World War II.
Oh, yes, very much.
Yeah. Where do you get your money from?
Well, we had from the earliest years known that we, in the wisest scenario, would get money both from government and non-government sources. So we've had income from most of the provinces, from the federal government, and from corporate donors, foundations, and service clubs. The Toronto service clubs have been terrific. Kiwanis Downtown Toronto Club, they've given us 3 brand new vehicles. And the Rotary Club most recently gave us a brand new Ford 4-wheel drive diesel truck. And there have been many generous individuals too. So,
and what part of
and
the country,
churches too.
Churches too. What part of the country are you mostly engaged with?
Well, we've been involved in almost all the provinces and in the Northwest Territories and the Yukon and Nunavut. And so we are nationwide. We have some of activity overseas too, mostly in the poorest countries, Haiti and Bolivia. And we've done a full range of development projects in Haiti, road construction, school building, immunization, reforestation, agriculture, and immunization. So
and we have a model on the table here, which I gather is another one of the after pictures as opposed to before.
Yeah. Yes, that is. That's
Whose place is this?
That is Steve and Laura Barry's home in Almont, Ontario, not too far from Ottawa.
Okay.
And they lived in a place in almost as bad shape as the shot you showed a few minutes ago. And again, Rideau lumber was a huge help. And those windows and doors that you see were all either donated or discounted. All the drywall was not only donated but delivered. And so we must recognize this, the great spirit of people in these project communities in helping us to put good news in place.
And how long did it take to put that together?
That was also about 4 or 5 months.
So you guys are not quite like Habitat. They get, hundreds of people together and they put up a whole house in 2 days or something like that, right? That's not your approach.
We're not that fast, no. And right now, of course, in the remote areas of the north, we are honoring the phrase, standing tree to standing home. And we have been beating this drum in Ottawa for years. We've been saying, hey, many of these communities have standing spruce and pine right there. Frontiers has a dozen portable sawmills. And the way to tackle the national housing problem, the best way, is for the people to harvest their own timber, skid the logs to our mills, make their own lumber, build their own homes, and combine that activity with on-site marketable skill training. So we have a lot of success stories in the last couple of years in Kitkasagic in northern Quebec, where we've had 2 mills going full tilt, now operated by 2 Algonquins themselves, who previously had, I could say this, low self-esteem. Now they're so proud of their jobs making lumber, and they're living in homes, new homes that they helped build themselves, and they don't have any personal problems anymore.
Can I ask you a bit of a smart-ass question?
If I could just finish,
Go ahead.
they've made enough lumber for 16 new homes, and they're all occupied. Then also, we finished a new home in Collins, Ontario, where we brought in a mill too. And then in Garden Hill in Manitoba, a very impressive effort, mainly in that Island Lake community, with 10 homes completed now. Sorry.
Good. No, my mistake for jumping in. Here's my smart aleck question, though, okay? Are there people in the Aboriginal community in this country who see you as a white man leading this organization and say to themselves, we can do this. We don't need your help. It'd actually be better if white people weren't a part of this. You get any of that?
Not really visibly, but our president, Lawrence Gladue, he really deserves far more recognition than I do. He's also a member of the Order of Canada, but just a splendid example as a citizen. He is a university graduate. He speaks French and English and Cree. He's a multi-engine bush pilot, a champion rodeo rider of Alberta. He's just a great fun guy and entertainer. And he'd be a wonderful Governor General of Canada. And so we have been hoping that will happen. But about me personally, to answer your question, I've been hoping to phase myself out for years and years. And it just hasn't happened. It's almost happened a couple of times. And we had a really great candidate but on the last minute we found he wasn't the gentleman that we wanted. And so,
well, you know what? You said
but there's some others on the horizon.
Sure. You mentioned the Governor General a second ago, and I want to pick up on that.
Good.
Because we've, of course, in the province of Ontario, we had James Bartleman as the Lieutenant Governor who had Aboriginal roots.
Yes.
But of course, we've never had anybody with Aboriginal roots as the Governor General. Is that the next frontier?
Well, I hope so. We have been advocating this for years and years, and it's 150 years overdue. The people that should have been first have been last. And it would be a very healing thing for Canada to have somebody like Lawrence Gladue, our president, or Phil Fontaine, or Francis Sanderson, president of Anishinaabe Homes in Toronto, people like that. There are so many splendid Native leaders that should have been in Rideau Hall a long time ago. And it would be such a healing thing for Canada. And I guess I can say this on the program, especially for Quebecers, many of whom think Canada began with Frontenac and Champlain. So I do hope this happens soon. The next appointment will be of a first Canadian.
Let me ask you one last thing, and that is we are in this year observing the 200th anniversary of the War of 1812, and we know that if you go to Queenston Heights, you can see a wonderful monument to General Isaac Brock, who was felled in a battle there actually 200 years ago next month, I think. And my question is, do we need another monument there?
We certainly do. What we need is a 186-foot monument to Tecumseh. The one to Brock is 185 feet high, so we need one just as taller for Tecumseh, who did save this wonderful country. And so many are unaware of how he recruited and mobilized not only Ojibwa and Mohawk, but Potawatomi and Winnebagos and even Sioux warriors, Delawares and Shawnees, all these people from both sides of the border. And they suffered over twice the casualties of non-Native Canadians and British. And there at Queenston Heights, what do you see? Well, you see the monument to Brock, then you see an 8-foot memorial to his horse, Alfred. Then if you can find it, there's an 18-inch boulder with the plaque, Indians in the War of 1812, and no mention of Tecumseh. So this is a continuing insult, really, to First Canadians that should be remedied as soon as possible, and this would be a very good time during the commemoration years. And it shouldn't be the Native people having to ask for this. The non-Native people who are the grateful recipients of this country, we should demand that our government do this now.
Well put. Charles Catto, it's good of you to come into TVO today. Thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.